Imagine going to sleep on a relatively normal Friday night and waking up the next morning to find the global landscape completely, just irrevocably altered.
Yeah,
You check your phone, and the headlines are literally screaming.
it's terrifying.
The Middle East is engulfed in a massive regional war, and the global oil supply has been choked off overnight. It's the kind of sheer whiplash that leaves you staring at your screen, just trying to comprehend how the world shifted so dramatically while you were dreaming.
Right.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Today's mission is to cut through the intense, blinding fog of war surrounding the massive, breaking military escalation between the United States, Israel, and Iran that kicked off on February 28th, 2026.
It's a staggering amount of information to process. And the situation on the ground is evolving by the minute.
Truly.
So to help you actually understand the tactical reality and the broader implications, we are synthesizing a very specific stack of sources today.
Yeah, let's lay this out.
We are pulling live, minute-by-minute military tracking from the war zone. We're pairing that with historical arms control analysis from Arms Control Today. And we are also integrating a highly critical anti-war YouTube broadcast called Redacted to get a vastly different perspective on the fallout.
Before we go a single step further, we need to issue a crucial disclaimer.
Absolutely.
We are looking at highly politically charged sources with drastically conflicting narratives today. We want to be crystal clear. We are not taking sides or endorsing any of these viewpoints. Our job is strictly to report impartially on what the original source material contains so you can understand the different perspectives at play.
Exactly. And to really grasp how the intelligence went so dark leading up to today, we actually have to look at the powder keg built last summer.
Right, because you can't...
It analyzed today's strikes in a vacuum. The table was set back in June of 2025.
The June 2025 strikes on Iran's declared nuclear facilities.
Yeah.
Fordo, Natanz, Esfahan. Arms Control Today had some intense details on the ordnance used in that operation. The U.S. dropped the massive ordnance penetrator, the MOP, specifically on Fordo.
Which is just a massive piece of hardware.
For anyone who doesn't track munitions, that is the largest conventional weapon in the U.S. arsenal. It's specifically designed to bust through mountains and reach deeply buried bunkers.
Right.
And they were combining that with waves of Tomahawk cruise missiles hitting uranium enrichment and conversion infrastructure.
And, the fallout from that specific choice of weaponry and the political messaging afterward is what created the blind spot we're dealing with today.
How so?
Well, following those June strikes, the political rhetoric out of the U.S. and Israel was triumphant. The public was told the Iranian nuclear program had been obliterated. Obliterated, yeah. But the IAEA, alongside early classified intelligence assessments, pushed back hard on that narrative. They assessed that the program was actually only set back by a few months.
Just a few months.
Yeah. The centrifuges were largely intact. The enriched uranium stockpiles weren't completely destroyed.
So Iran realizes they took a massive hit, but the core of their program survived. And their immediate legislative response was to completely shut the door. The Iranian parliament passed a law prohibiting any further cooperation with the IAEA.
They blinded the international inspectors.
And froze all diplomatic back channels.
Creating an absolute intelligence black hole. When you sever international oversight like that, you force adversarial intelligence agencies to rely entirely on satellite telemetry and localized human intelligence.
Which is notoriously fragmented.
Exactly. It's a recipe for extreme paranoia on all sides, and it set the conditions for the unprecedented offensive we woke up to this morning.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because the sheer scale of the offensive that kicked off today is difficult to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Israel has dubbed their campaign Operation Roaring Lion, and the U.S. is operating under Operation Epic Fury. The data coming in from the war zone paints a picture of a massive synchronized assault.
The numbers are insane.
Israel sent 200 fighter jets to hit 500 targets near simultaneously.
Yeah.
And the U.S. military conducted 900 strikes in just the first 12 hours, launching from land, air, and sea platforms.
The logistics required to sustain 900 strikes in a 12-hour window are mind-bending. You aren't just pushing buttons. You are coordinating land-based artillery, carrier strike groups, and multiple squadrons of aircraft in a highly contested, integrated air defense environment.
It's a massive orchestration.
Right.
Yep.
And the war zone highlighted the deployment of U.S. B-2 bombers. You don't bring the B-2 out unless you need to deliver massive, heavy payloads deep into denied airspace without being painted by early warning radar.
But the tactical shift that really stands out is the deployment of LUCS,
Yes.
the one-way attack drones. The war zone is reporting this as their first ever combat use by a newly formed unit, Task Force Scorpion Strike.
Scorpion Strike, yeah.
We're seeing a pivot from multi-million-dollar stealth fighters to swarm tactics with disposable assets.
It represents a fundamental shift in U.S. force projection in the region. Using LUCS drones allows Task Force Scorpion Strike to overwhelm air defense radars with sheer volume before the heavier payloads from the B-2s or the Tomahawks even arrive.
They're clearing the airspace kinetically.
Exactly, they are clearing the way.
And they were clearing it to reach highly strategic targets, military infrastructure, nuclear sites, and the command and control nodes. Which brings us to the decapitation strike.
Right.
Multiple U.S. and Israeli sources are claiming that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with 5 to 10 other top-tier Iranian leaders, was killed when his secure compound in Tehran was leveled.
Now, the Iranian state media apparatus is vehemently denying this. They're labeling the reports as mental warfare engineered to demoralize their chain of command.
But the tracking sources note a glaring absence. Khamenei has not been seen publicly, nor has a proof-of-life broadcast been transmitted since the initial bombardment.
Right, and the visual messaging happening parallel to the kinetic strikes is incredibly highly curated.
Oh, the optics.
Yeah, you have the raw data of the sorties, and then you have the optics. The war zone flagged a photograph released by the Israeli government showing Prime Minister Netanyahu on the phone with President Trump.
Yeah, and prominently placed right on Netanyahu's desk is a book titled Allies at War, which covers the Allied campaign to defeat Hitler.
That is not an accidental coffee table book.
No way.
It is a deliberate, highly calculated image designed to project a specific historical parallel to both domestic voters and the international community. They are framing the scale of this intervention by equating it to World War II.
It's a powerful framing device. But when you step away from the clinical military reporting the talk of sorties, payloads, and strategic posturing, the human toll on the ground fractures that narrative completely.
What's fascinating here is how violently the perspectives diverge depending on the source material you are consuming. When we analyze the redacted broadcast, we leave the sanitized language of the military tracking behind entirely.
Completely behind.
We are presented with a narrative of profound civilian devastation and, crucially, a massive strategic failure.
Keeping our disclaimer in mind, we are strictly reporting what this broadcast alleges.
Yes.
Redacted claims a horrific incident occurred during the initial wave of strikes. They report that U.S. and Israeli forces struck a primary school for girls in Tehran, resulting in the deaths of between 63 and 85 children in a single strike.
It's awful. And the commentators on the broadcast take that allegation further, framing the tragedy as the result of a deliberate deception.
Right, they claim this was a ruse.
A ruse, yeah.
According to the reporting, families sent their kids to school on a Saturday because they were led to believe that peace talks with U.S. officials were imminent. The broadcast specifically mentions a scheduled trip by a high-level U.S. official that made civilians believe the city would be temporarily safe from bombardment.
It is a harrowing claim that underscores the absolute chaos on the ground and the profound human cost being highlighted by anti-war voices. But beyond the civilian toll, the military analysts featured on redacted, specifically retired military officers, like Daniel Davis, and former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter offer a blistering critique of the operational strategy itself.
What's their angle?
They argue that despite the massive shock and awe bombardment of the first 12 hours, the U.S. and Israel are actually losing this war.
Which is wild. If you drop 900 strikes worth of ordnance in half a day, how do you lose? Scott Ritter stated flatly on the broadcast that the U.S. lost this war in 10 hours.
Their argument hinges on the failure of the decapitation strike to trigger an immediate regime collapse, because the Iranian leadership structure, or at least its decentralized command and control, is apparently still functioning.
Okay.
So Ritter and Davis argue the U.S. has wasted its most advanced, incredibly expensive precision munitions on empty buildings and decoys.
They are essentially saying the coalition launched a massive war without a viable Day 2 plan.
Exactly. The commentators on redacted stress that you cannot achieve a goal, like total regime change, or the complete dismantling of a hardened military apparatus solely from the air and sea.
You need boots on the ground.
You need a ground force for that. And without one, they argue the U.S. military is going to rapidly burn through its inventory of Tomahawk missiles and advanced interceptors. They simply won't have the logistical depth to sustain a multi-week campaign at this operational tempo.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the idea that Iran's command structure is still functioning was proven almost immediately.
Yeah, it was.
Iran didn't just absorb the 900 strikes and go dark. They launched a massive, coordinated counterattack. And they didn't limit their retaliation to Israel.
No, they didn't.
According to both the War Zone and the redacted broadcast, Iran utilized its arsenal of ballistic missiles and drones to strike U.S. bases hosted by allied Arab states across the entire Gulf.
Which is a huge escalation.
We are talking about confirmed or reported strikes in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, and Jordan.
The regional spillover is immediate and severe. Iran had telegraphed this move for months, warning that any neighboring nation hosting U.S. forces utilized in an offensive would be considered a legitimate military target.
And they followed through on that doctrine today.
They did. And what is critical from an analytical standpoint is that they are demonstrating the ability to actively penetrate the U.S.-supplied air defense shields of these Gulf nations.
The economic asymmetry of these strikes is just staggering. You're looking at a 10,000 to 1 cost disparity in some of these engagements.
It's unbelievable.
The sources detail how a relatively cheap $30,000 Iranian drone managed to completely bypass point defenses and strike a $300 million radar installation at the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain.
Wow.
Another strike in Qatar allegedly destroyed a $1.1 billion early warning radar system. It is the ultimate horrific return on investment. The math of modern warfare is just completely broken.
And that broken math is exactly what Iran appears to be weaponizing. The destruction of those specific radar systems in Bahrain and Qatar is a strategic catastrophe for the coalition.
Yeah.
Those aren't just expensive satellite dishes. They're the central nervous system of the entire regional missile defense architecture. This ties directly into a broader operational theory discussed by the military analysts. They hypothesize that Iran is executing a deliberate strategy of depletion.
Meaning they are intentionally holding back their most advanced hardware.
Right.
They aren't launching their hypersonic missiles yet. They are sending waves of older, slower drones and legacy ballistic missiles.
Precisely. They're forcing the U.S. and Israel to fire million-dollar Patriot and THAAD interceptors to shoot down $30,000 drones.
It's a war of attrition.
It is a calculated war of attrition aimed at the supply chain. The U.S. interceptor magazines are finite and incredibly slow to replenish. Once those magazines run dry, the air defense shields fail.
And at that point, Iran could theoretically unleash its more advanced, unstoppable weapons against high-value targets that are suddenly completely undefended.
Exactly. And they are already hitting dangerously close to major civilian hubs while testing those defenses. The reports indicate strikes near the Burj Khalifa and damage to the Palm Hotel in Dubai.
The psychological impact of seeing a drone strike in the middle of Dubai is going to send shockwaves through the global markets.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the fallout from this single day of warfare extends far beyond the airspace of the Middle East. The secondary effects have already activated the most critical economic choke points on the planet.
The absolute nightmare scenario for the global supply chain just went live.
Yeah.
According to the tracking sources, Iran has officially shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Simultaneously, the Houthis in Yemen have announced the total closure of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
Two massive arteries.
Two of the most critical arteries for global oil shipping and international maritime trade, completely blocked off. The sources predict an inevitable massive spike in global oil prices the second the markets open and react.
The macroeconomic shockwaves are going to be immense. But while the global economy braces for impact, the internal situation within Iran is rapidly descending into a different kind of chaos.
What's happening on the ground there?
The war zone is reporting a near-total internet blackout across the country, with national connectivity dropping to just 4% of normal levels.
Wow, 4%.
Yeah, this is a textbook tactic used by the regime during severe internal crises to control the flow of information, blind outside observers, and disrupt coordination among civilian opposition groups.
And the U.S. is heavily leaning into psychological warfare to capitalize on that domestic chaos. President Trump issued a direct statement offering Iranian troops full immunity if they lay down their arms and surrender to coalition forces. He paired that with a blunt warning of certain death if they remain at their posts. On top of that, exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi put out a massive, highly publicized call to action.
Which is significant.
Very. He is urging the Iranian military and security forces to defect, side with the civilian population, and overthrow the regime from within while the command structure is allegedly fractured. They are pulling every psychological lever available to try and crack the military from the inside out.
Definitely.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about the whiplash of waking up to a completely altered global landscape.
Yeah.
As you process the sheer volume of tactical data, historical context, and conflicting narratives we've covered today, it is crucial to remember why this matters to your daily life.
It's not just theory.
No, this isn't just abstract military theory playing out oceans away. It's the price you are going to pay at the gas pump next week when the localized shockwaves hit the global oil markets.
Right.
It's the inflation that will ripple through the supply chain because commercial shipping can no longer transit the Red Sea. It is the geopolitical instability that will reshape international alliances for decades to come.
Absolutely.
And perhaps most importantly, synthesizing these wildly different sources highlights how the fog of war makes finding the absolute truth nearly impossible when multiple factions are actively weaponizing the narrative to their advantage.
When you look at the clinical satellite tracking next to the fierce anti-war critiques and the highly curated political messaging, you realize that in modern conflicts, the battle over the narrative is fought with the same intensity as the battle in the airspace.
That's a great point.
You have to constantly evaluate the strategic motives behind every piece of information you consume.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a specific, provocative thought to mull over on your own. It builds on what we've discussed regarding the brutal economics of this new era of combat. Think about the math of that strike in Bahrain. If a slow-moving $30,000 drone can successfully bypass state-of-the-art, multi-layered air defenses to completely destroy a $300 million radar system, what does that mean for the future of global superpowers?
It's a massive question.
Is traditional multi-billion-dollar military dominance becoming obsolete in an age of cheap, asymmetrical, push-button warfare? It's something to seriously consider as we watch this conflict continue to unfold. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.